Radio Raumstation. 24 hours a day. Yeah.
Today with JANICE ZAMB and Stephen Jones. Hi Janice, hi Steve. I can't tell you how proud I am to have you in this interview. I'm not so much curious at all, but in this case I am. I want to know many, many things. But first of all, my hello to Eugene, and to you, a couple of creativity and music, poems and more.
Guten Tag, Melanie. Great to see you, great to hear you, Melanie, and thanks for inviting us to your radio show.
Yes, greetings from beautiful Eugene, Oregon, Melanie.
Stephen, your voice is like a beer's voice. I like it very much. Thanks again for coming. You are a couple for a long time. Of course, we want to hear about that too. But first of all, some questions about your childhood related to music and poetry. Janice, tell us shortly where you come from and what influenced you to begin writing.
Okay, Melanie. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, home of the blues. Music was a big part of my life as early as I can remember. I grew up with rock and roll. Lucky enough to be one of the early people to hear Elvis, Everly Brothers, and then moving on to the Beatles and Motown, all that music. It was great. But my first writing experience was in high school in English class, where we had a creative writing course. And my piece happened to win a contest for best creative writing in the school. And it was about a rock and roll star, so that even made it more special. And then I began writing skits for the high school to promote certain events, performing them live for the audience and creating awareness of promotions coming to the school. And then I progressed to actually getting in the 60s and listening to artists like Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, and John Prine, who were writing music about life and the times, being 60s during the Vietnam War and everything. And I really started to learn a lot about what it's like to be a writer from those people.
Your voice definitely is a blues voice, so I'm very sad that you didn't start to sing. Anyway, your poems are beautiful. We will listen to it later on. Steve, now it's your turn. What are your roots related to music, and what was your first instrument you played at what age?
Thanks for asking, Melanie. Yes, well, it all began, of course, for me in my hometown of Aberdare in Wales, South Wales, UK. And I happened to be very lucky to be the son of a mother who had a wonderful voice and sang with my Auntie Alma. And they were a duet at a church, duo and church. And my mother was soprano and she was alto. And it was a wonderful experience. And then, of course, they were very influential in my musical beginning. My mother asked me one day, what would you like to play? And I said, I'd love to play guitar. And next day she bought me a guitar. And it was a cheap little guitar. It was like probably close to a cricket bat. But anyways, it was worthy. And I played Three Blind Mice, I think was my first tune I played on it, which was kind of crazy. But
I wish we had a recording of that.
Yeah, Three Blind Mice. But it kind of began from there, it just blossomed a little bit. So, that was how I started that started it all for me.
I am amazed you come from UK. Hope we get some more information on this later on. But now, when you met, where and when was this? what was the first concert you went together? Tell us a bit about that time and the bands you loved and have seen and influenced you both.
Well, we met in Berkeley, California at a party of mutual friends. And it was on the Ides of March in 1975. I remember the date. And Steve and I have been together every day since.
Yeah, we were really lucky. You know, that's sometimes it's magic's in the air. And magic was in the air for us that night. And we've been together for a long, long time. I shouldn't tell you how long, but quite a long. But
Oh, I'll tell him. We've been married 46 years?
46 years.
Wow.
Okay. Anyway, and what was the first concert we went to? Was it
I
George?
believe it was George Benson.
Yeah, at the Keystone in San Francisco.
Right.
Yeah.
It was an awesome concert.
And yes, it was a great intro for me too. The first real jazz that I heard, because I was all rock and roll and folk music. Like we saw bands. Oh, just think about it. It was San Francisco in the 1970s that we saw these bands,
Yeah,
and it was
correct.
we saw David Bowie, Paul McCartney, and Wings, which we actually got free tickets to from a radio station.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh, we saw bands like UB40, Talking Heads, The Police.
Rolling Stones.
We saw a lot of different people, Stevie Winwood, the Doobie Brothers, Jeff Beck. So, yeah, quite a vast array of music.
And then we also got into the more jazz and fusion
Right.
people like Pat Metheny and John
Chick Corea.
Luponzi.
Return to Forever,
Yeah.
Chick Corea, Stanley Clark,
So we
Lenny
could go.
White.
We could go on for days.
We could go on for a long time about this.
Yeah.
Steve, to maybe add, we've heard now you saw a lot of good bands and very important bands, but what was a very important moment for your musical development in the near history? Did you meet any real star who really flashed you?
Well, I did meet somebody that was pretty close to my heart as far as a musician, and that was Joe Pass. And we had tickets to go see him at this little jazz Japanese restaurant called Yoshi's. And we happened to sit down with him, and actually Janice sat down with him at the bar. And he was smoking a cigar and having a glass of brandy.
And there was an empty seat next to him, so who sits there but me?
Yeah, and so, you know, one thing led to another, and he wrote down on a napkin, "Keep picking, Steve," because she told him that my husband's a guitarist, and he goes, "Well, he's probably watching my fingers then," which I was.
Yeah.
But so he was very influential, and of course Larry Coryell was another guitar player, jazz guitar player, and Jeff Beck, of course. So I would say that rounds it out.
Tell us please a bit about your band career, Steve. In which bands you played, what instrument, who was in, and did you do own songs? Do you have one recording you maybe can play for us you loved the most?
Well, here's an interesting thing. I started off with my first band experience was the Comets from Aberdare in Wales. And we were very young. We were teens, very young teens, like in our 13 to 15 years of age range. It comprised of a drummer, a bass player, 2 guitar players, and 2 singers. And I was the rhythm guitar player, and we did a lot of gigs around Wales and a little bit in England. We did go to London once and play for the Shadows, believe it or not, for their after the show party, which was an experience. It was really good. Anyways, but yeah, I don't have any recordings, unfortunately, of my time with the Comets. We did get offered to play at the Star Club in Hamburg, where the Beatles started. But to be honest with you, that didn't work out because we were actually too young. They wouldn't let us play there. We were not old enough. So it all worked out. And I think that's pretty much it as far as my beginning band. But then, of course, I did move eventually to London. But I want to backtrack a little bit. I started playing folk guitar in Aberdeen, and I developed a small little folk club, and it was called the Iron Bridge Folk Club. It was at a pub, and it was a good thing. It was a back room. They gave it to us for pretty much free. And so as long as the people that came to visit us and listen to the music, bought beer. So that was the deal. If you wanted to come, you bought beer. So, which you don't have to convince a Welshman to drink beer because they'll drink it any time of the day. Anyway, and we got some really good artists. We got Welsh people to perform, single folk guitar songwriters. And we also got people from London and around the England area. And one time we got this band called Pisces. And Pisces was comprised of two guys, Richard Digens and John O'Connor. And eventually I became really good friends with the both of them. And they invited me to come and live in London with them as a part of the band, So I did. It took a lot of doing, but I did it. Moved to London. Had a really good experience in London.
You were like 18 or so?
I was younger. I was about 17. I was 17 when I went to London. And I lived there for 2 years. And, 3 years actually. And I performed solo sometimes on my own at certain clubs, venues. The Troubadour, which is a very famous folk club and coffee shop on Old Brompton Road in London. And my next step was I met a lady, unfortunately not Janice, but ended up moving to California and started my life in...
And it turns out that the lady he met, I knew. Now, you talk about a guy from Wales, comes to America, and that was his first wife, by the way, because Steve needed practice. So...
Yes, yes.
And it turns out that I went to high school with her, and
they knew each other.
Yeah, we weren't really friends, but that was really quite amazing when we discovered that we knew his first wife. Okay, Steve, you can go on now.
Well, actually, from there. I ended up living on my own. Eventually, I got into a divorce thing and that whole part of my life, which was kind of crazy. But, and then I met up with these guys from Oakland, California. They were an R&B soul band, and I played for them, a guitar player, lead guitar player, rhythm guitar. Played for them for about a year, almost 2 years, and we did gigs around California.
When did you create your first own songs, and do you have a recorded version for us we can play? What is it about?
I didn't really record much in the early days in California, to be honest. I have no recordings of anything until later. In the 90s is when I really started to record, and 1996, and I did an album, a CD, my first attempt at recording anything, and it was Out of the Rain was the title of the album, of the CD, and I think there were 12 tunes altogether on there. And one of the tunes was Blues Thing, which Janice really liked quite a bit. And didn't you, Jan? Did you like it?
I liked that actually was. I had two favorites on that, and that was one of them.
Yeah,
it had a lot of energy.
By the way, Janice, if I would ask you which of your poems you once wrote would fit to this song, which one you would choose, and can you read it for us?
Right, so it was hard to pick a poem to go with Blues Thing because it had so much energy and it was so lively and fast moving, and my poetry seems to be more subdued, but I happened to find one that I actually turned out to be a song that Melvin Donovan, our beloved Facebook and Vandalism friend, took and recorded. And I'm just going to read you what was first a poem and then later changed into being a song. And the name of the poem is called The Dance of Life. And I'll read it for you. You only get one chance. Dance like you can fly to the rhythm of time across the cosmic tide. Dance with joy in your heart like you're a shooting star. There'll be times when darkness falls. Let music light your way until the sun shines once more and the dance of life goes on. There's music in your soul. Let it ebb and flow. Reach up and touch the stars. Dance with all your heart. You can change the music when it doesn't feel right. You are the dancer in the dance of life.
So now we hear your first song, dear Steve. It is called Blues Thing. very good song. Janice, at that time, Steve was with bands. What was your main activity as concerns your creativity? And did you join some of Steve's concerts?
I was at all Steve's band performances and jam sessions because I am his biggest fan. But during this time, I was focused on a career in advertising and marketing. And there wasn't much room for creativity as I was on the account service side, which meant that I prepared marketing presentations, marketing briefs, client presentations, attended music recording, voiceover recordings, and worked with the creative team to fine-tune the copy of everything that was being presented. So it was a more academic part of my life than it was writing anything creatively. But during this time, I really developed a love for poetry, especially Mary Oliver and Pablo Neruda. And one of the things I learned from him was that how simple a thought can be. One of his quotes, I should say, is, "I want to do to you what spring does with the cherry trees." And that the visual nature of poetry is what really kind of makes me want to write. It's just how can you portray something in words that some people can see. And then, of course, during this time, I fell in love with Leonard Cohen and George Harrison, John Lennon, and Paul McCartney. And of course, a big fan of Bernie Taupin, who's Elton John's lyricist. And I could finally relate to somebody who wasn't a songwriter, but just the lyricist. But there was something in the back of my mind that happened years ago when I lived for 3 years in Toronto, Canada. And I lived with a group of people in a house, and one of them was a woman named Jane, who ran a folk club in Toronto called the Riverboat. And at that time, in the early 70s, we were getting a ton of musicians coming through. And one of the main people I remember is John Prine. And he actually stayed in our house with us. And it was to sit down and talk to somebody then who was just, it was, his song was Hello in There, which was his very big song. And it's about an old man thinking back on his life. And so when we had dinner, he talked a lot about what music meant to him, and what he felt himself was like the storyteller for the common man of America, and especially how old people, what happens as they age, and his sympathies for them and what they saw. And if you ever have a chance to listen to Hello in There, just take a listen to the lyrics. But he was such a sweet, down-to-earth person, nervous as hell to be starting out, but I can't imagine what it's like to sit down in the early days with somebody of his prominence. And that has always stayed the undercurrent of whenever I write.
That must have been a really cool experience. Now tell us a bit about the most important stages of your life as concerns music and poems.
Yet again, I have to go back to my roots, which is Wales, growing up there, being surrounded by, as well, musicians, my mother, my auntie, and she was an instrumentalist, by the way. She played accordion and piano, my auntie Alma. But going on from there, I think my influences were, my beginnings were definitely the folk club, because I started that with one other person, and that was really, really important to me, because I got to play there. Of course, we all did that, but more than that, it was the booking of artists and getting in new people and finding out what they did and becoming friendly and friends with them, so forth. And then, of course, moving to London. And London had a huge, musical shot in the arm, basically, for me. It was just an uplifting experience. I met a lot of musicians, some actually quite well known. I mean, I met Steve Hillage. Nick Greenwood played bass for them, and he also played on Screaming Lord Such's Fire, if you can believe that. He played bass on that.
Wow.
So I did meet some from fairly, I guess you could say, quasi-famous, not completely, but they definitely got around and did things. But yeah, so London, Wales, London, and then of course the US. And the US for me was magic because there was so much music. That's where I got all my experience.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Thanks, son.
All right. The most important events that happened in my life that triggered some creativity in me that I had lying low in my soul. But it was in 2009 when my brother was dying from pancreatic cancer. And my little great nephew, Hunter, was about 4 at the time. And he called my brother Jerry, he called him Papa. And he asked if a spaceship was going to come and take him to heaven. And, we all talked to him about this, but when I went home that night, I sat down and wrote a story called Angel of Joy. My brother was a comedian, sometimes funny, sometimes not, but a joke a minute. Everybody loved him. He was just one of those terrific guys. So I wrote this story. It was basically about how heaven, all the angels in heaven were crying because they were unhappy because they didn't have an angel of joy. And God looks down at the window of souls, and he sees my brother, and he is basically going to become his angel of joy. So it takes it through that, and it was really written for my family. And my sister-in-law Carol actually got to read it to him before he passed, which was really wonderful. And I did self-publish that story, and everyone in my family has it. And this launched a creativity of short stories and little memory books for my friends that I actually got published for them. They would supply photographs, and I'd write a story for them about their life or their kids. And my computer is filled with short stories that need to be published, and maybe one day I'll do it and even publish my poetry, but I have so much fun writing, I can't get around to doing all that. So, and then what I find really began writing my poetry was joining Facebook. I was inspired by so many people I met on Facebook, including you, Melanie. And so it brought out a whole new part of my spirit that I had in there, but I never really took the time to develop. So that's pretty much how that goes.
Yeah, I remember now you have many poems on your computer. Can you read one and tell us why you choose this?
I'm going to share a poem that I wrote a couple years ago. It's called The Last Sunflower, and it's about climate change. What happened after I wrote the poem, I was really surprised, but Gunter Seeling, which other people know as Doc Pro Tool, Doc Italy, recorded it with me and he just asked me to record a voice. I did the narration, and he came up with this electronic tune that is quite incredible. But I think what I'll do for you right now is to read the poem, and you could see what I mean. Once I walked in fields of sunflowers, their golden faces greeting me. I took their beauty for granted, as if they'd always be. Over the years the fields grew sparse, fewer flowers did I see, until one day the fields were bare, but for one flower wilting in the breeze. Sadly I saw it coming, but didn't do a thing. Now I wish I could turn back time, long before the last sunflower, when the earth was in its prime.
Surprise, surprise, 'cause you chose this one, Janice. I took it out of my files and I will play it now for us all. Here Günther Sieling, Doc Italy, Doc Pro Tool, with Janice Zamb's lyrics on The Last Sunflower.
Once I walked in fields of sunflowers, their golden faces greeting me. I took their beauty for granted, as if they'd always be. Over the years, the fields grew sparse. Fewer sunflowers did I see. Until one day, the fields were bare. But for one flower wilting in the breeze. Sadly, I saw it coming. But didn't do a thing. Now I wish I could turn back time. Long before the last sunflower. When the earth was in its prime.
Steve, your YouTube channel, FastStuff08, has over 1,000 tunes. Could you tell us about an instrumental you liked from your early days?
I did a number that I really liked, and it was Rocking Out, actually. And it was a really good number. It was a rock and roll kind of feel. And then, there's a bunch of other tunes that I really like. There's a lot of blues tunes that I've done.
And you do some good covers. You do some amazing covers.
Yeah, I've done a lot of Wes Montgomery, jazz. I mean, there's a jazz side to me. I wear a lot of hats when it comes to playing guitar. I can play finger picking folk. Tried to say that twice fast. Anyway, finger picking folk stuff all the way to jazzy type, rock and roll as well. So, yeah, I like it all.
So no finger-picking folk now. A little piece of rock with Stephen Jones, Rocking Out. Wow, this was a real rocking sound. Janice, could you please tell us what is a haiku and how came you love to do this?
Well, the haiku is a Japanese poetic form that consists of 3 lines with 5 syllables in the first line, 7 in the second, and 5 in the third. A friend sent me a book by the immortal Matsui Basho, the master of haiku poetry, born in the 17th century. I loved its simplicity, its free form, and the challenge of capturing images and emotions in so few words. I'll go with it. It just lets you allow your thoughts to roam, and you write them on paper and then you try to cut them into so few words. It's a challenge but a joy.
Could you please read one you love and tell us why you've chosen it?
I'm going to read a haiku about a flower. And if anybody knows me, that they know that that's a common theme for my poetry. And I try to put my love for a flower in 3 lines, and here they are. All I really need is a flower to make me dream of a better world. That's it. That's a haiku.
I think it's a challenge. Steve, do you have a song that Janice haiku makes you think of, and why?
Well, there is a tune that comes to mind, and it's called Smooth Nights. It's a mellow tune, and I think it suits her poetry pretty well, and it allows your mind to wander a bit.
So let us wander with Smooth Nights from Stephen Jones. beautiful piece of music, Stephen. What is, as per your feeling, your most important song? Tell us about it and why it is important, and can we please hear it after?
Sure. I think the most important tune of my, kind of now music, I guess you could say, is a tune called Ancient Warriors. And it's something that really was quite a complex tune for me to write, and get all the orchestration together and the different rhythm tracks and so forth, which I wrote all myself. So I think that was probably one of my most important tunes.
Not easy to do all the tracks by oneself. So now let us hear Ancient Warrior. Terrific song, Stephen. Janice, which one is your favorite song of Stephen? What is it about and why is it your favorite one? We like to play it after you answered.
Angel Blues is on my top 5 list of Steve's most creative songs. This is blues heaven to me. And the reason is because He begins with an ethereal choir and then bursts into a blues guitar that is absolutely awesome. It's such a clever composition, brilliant performance and arrangement, and Steve always plays from the heart.
Well, thanks, Jan.
Well, you do.
I know. I try to do my best. It's, I think from the heart's where it's got to come from.
I think that's what's so meaningful about your music is you feel it when you play.
Well, it's like you with your poetry and your writings. It comes from your heart.
Aren't we heartful people?
So we're laughing now because we want to cheer people up a bit.
So let's cheer people up with that song, Angel Blues. Another excellent tune, Stephen. But now, what is your favorite poem or haiku of Janice? What is it about and why you like it the most? Can you please read it for us?
Yes, the title of it is There is Hope, And I think it's an uplifting, and it reflects her positive, nature and outlook on the world. So with that, I'm going to read the poem. So here it goes. There is hope in every sunrise. There is kindness in every smile. There is beauty in every flower. There is breath in every forest. There is a wish in every rainbow. There is a trust in every child. There is comfort in every hug. There is light in every darkness. There is a dream in every heart. There is love in every life. There is peace in every soul. By Janice Zamb.
Read beautifully by Stephen Jones.
Thank you. Okay.
Both of you, do you have something like your song?
We have a few songs that mean a lot to us, but I'm going to give you my personal favorite, which I think should be our song. It's something by George Harrison. The day after I met Steve, he came over to my apartment and he brought his guitar and he sang the song to me. Well, I was a goner. That was such a beautiful moment, and I'll never ever forget it. And every day is something to be with this man.
Oh, thanks, Jan. I'm not much of a singer, but I am. Sometimes I can do it. And that night I did, and yeah, it was fun to do. And it was my acoustic guitar too, by the way. So, okay, and I also have a favorite tune of ours. When we used to visit Las Vegas many times, because we loved to go there, there was a band that used to play in one of the bars in Aladdin, and we used to love to just listen to these guys. They were great, and they played pretty much all Earth, Wind, and Fire tunes and songs, and it was just brilliant. And so my favorite tune is September by Earth, Wind, and Fire.
That happens to be my birthday month.
I know. I know.
Good choice, Steve.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Definitely a very good song. Janice, what is your latest music project? You are a part of Trinity, which is a virtual international 3-woman band doing music together via internet. In is Daniela Jovic from Belgrade doing the instrumentals, me as a singer, and you write the lyrics and do sometimes videos for us. What is your favorite Trinity song? And can we hear it, please? We would love you to read the lyrics before.
I have to say, combining with you and Daniela has been such a fabulous experience and has brought out a real creativity in me. And Melanie, I have you to thank for that because you write some amazing lyrics. So it's always a challenge, and I want to write the best I can for you guys.
And we love Trinity. We love the Trinity.
Yes, don't we love them?
Yeah, we love them.
Yeah. And I have to say, I've got my favorites, but I think the last song we did, your Spanish guitar, I really love. And one of the reasons is it was the genesis of a thought I had after listening to Spanish music performed by Julian Breen. And it's a more softer, romantic type of music. And the lyrics just came to me, and you did an amazing job as always in the vocals, Melanie, and Danny in arranging the music. So
Wonderful.
I'm glad you like it.
Mm-hmm.
Here are the lyrics to your Spanish guitar. Every night as darkness falls, underneath a dome of stars, I hear music drifting from your Spanish guitar. It calls to me in the twilight and stirs my heart, but I'm alone in my reverie, watching you in the dark. floating in a fantasy, swaying to your wistful tune. Jasmine blossoms scent the breeze, romance in their perfume. Passion from your fingertips ignites the strings of my heart. It feels like a lover's kiss when you play your guitar. I close my eyes and dream you've loved me from afar, bound together by the music from your Spanish guitar. How I long to let you know what you mean to me, but your eyes are miles away, lost in your melody. Passion from your fingertips ignites the strings of my heart. It feels like a lover's kiss when you play your guitar. Every night I hope and pray that you look my way and play your Spanish guitar with me in your heart.
Every night as darkness falls, underneath the dome of stars, I hear the music drifting from your Spanish guitar. It calls to me in the twilight and steeps my heart. But I'm alone in my reverie, watching you in the dark, floating in a fantasy, swaying to your wistful tune. Jasmine blossoms scent the breeze, romance is the perfume. Passion from your fingertips ignites the strings of my heart. It feels like a lover's kiss when you play your guitar. Close my eyes and dream you've loved me from afar, bound together by the music from your Spanish guitar. How I long to let you know what you mean to me, but your eyes are miles away, lost in your melody. Passion from your fingertips ignites the strings of my heart. It feels like a lover's kiss when you play your guitar. Every night I hope and pray that you look my way and play your Spanish guitar with me in your heart. Every night I hope and pray that you look my way and play your Spanish guitar with me in your heart. Now, Steve, these days you are active in fusion. Which are the projects you are involved in, and what is your current song you work on? Can you introduce us, and maybe we can hear already a preview?
Actually, I think one of my important tunes was Winter Fusion, which was a guitar piece that I wrote, and it was quite complex. Right now, I'm working on something a little less complex, so not to be, disclosed at this time because I haven't finished it. But it's coming down the pipeline pretty soon, and I'm working on a couple of new fusion numbers as we speak today. So yeah, it's exciting.
It is. I've heard a bit of it. Sneak peek.
A
Thanks,
sneak peek,
thanks,
yes. tasty, and our time is running. Janice, is there already maybe a little sneak preview on a poem you work on right now?
Well, I've been fooling around with different ideas, but I have one that I started writing, which sometimes it never ends up being, as you well know, doesn't end up being what you produce. But Work in Progress is a poem that is reflecting the mood that the world is in right now. And it's called The Light. Don't let despair darken your heart. Don't let anger turn to malice. Wake with the sun where hope begins, and believe the world is a beautiful place where love can blossom and kindness reigns. That's it for now.
I hope it will end in peace for everybody. But now our interview must find an end too. So Steve, if you have to say goodbye to the listeners, what song you would choose?
Well, it's a tune that I wrote with a Welsh twist, because the title is Welsh, and it's called Diolch yn fawr, which means thank you very much, which people would say to da iawn, you're welcome.
What a tune, Stephen. I really say biggest and warmest thanks to the both of you. Can you, Janice, please finish this interview with the last haiku? I say bye from my side. Very happy I had you here.
Thank you very much, Melanie, and we just want to wish you
Auf
Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you so much, Melanie.
We love you.
We love you. We had a ball doing this, and all the best to all your listeners. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, everybody.
Celebrate your life. A universe dwells within. Live in peace and light.
Radio Raumstation. Original music 24 hours a day. Yeah.
My name is Melanie Colley.